Good evening and welcome. This is the Falmouth Planning Board December 11th meeting. The first thing on the agenda is the minutes from November 27th and December 4th. Mr. Secretary or Clerk, whatever it is.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend the approval of the minutes of November 27th and December 4th, 2018 as corrected.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're moving along fast tonight. Public comment. This is for anybody that would like to come and address us, this board, for anything that's not on the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move on.
Come on, Carla, just raise your hand.
She's on the agenda, she can't.
Never know.
How about, this is a public hearing. Do we have any notices? I heard we're way over budget on notices, so we better,
This is a public hearing notice for the Burton Trust, and 28 abutters were notified by certified mail return receipt, and the notice was published twice, 11/23 and 11/30/2018.
the applicant, Burton Trust, Slade M. Burton and Janice A. Burton trustees, special permit application for construction of a mixed-use building, first floor offices and 2 apartments with coverage of the structures and parking at 69.4%, located at 160 Catherine Lee Bates Road. So because this is a special permit application, we need a supermajority, and we don't have have it tonight, so we open the meeting only, and we continue it.
Yes,
To a
if I
date
may,
certain.
if
Yes,
I
yes,
may,
take over, please.
oftentimes when there's a special permit and a supermajority is required, applicants are hesitant, particularly at the beginning of a process, to start off when they have a short board, because they would need 100% of the votes with 5 of you here.
Right.
Now, I'm fairly certain that we adopted the Mullen Rule, and you could conceivably miss one hearing and make it up. But it's not unusual for an applicant, particularly at the beginning of a process with a short board, to ask for a continuation without any testimony. So all members of the board will be eligible to vote when we bring this back. The applicant has asked respectfully, requested this matter be continued until January 8th, 2019. And with the motion of the board, that's exactly what we would do.
So move.
So a motion to continue till January 8th,
second.
2019.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving right along. The next item on the agenda is applicant John Banner, site plan review, application and construction for a detached accessory apartment at 7 Toledo Street. And Tom, would you remind me why we're bringing this back?
Yes, Mr. Banner had an application for an accessory housing bylaw that predated our zoning changes. His lot was 75, his lot is 7,200 square feet. The minimum lot size presently in the zoning bylaws is 7,500 square feet. Had his application arrived prior to the first advertisement for the hearings for town meeting, he would be operating under the old bylaw. But since it arrived after, it is operating under the new bylaw, which requires a 7,500 square foot minimum lot size. I've had a very brief conversation with Mr. Duffy. We've got a couple things we're still trying to get caught up with. Essentially, at this point, Mr. Banner's option, frankly his only option, is to seek variance for the lot size. Variances, as you may know, are difficult to achieve. They're based on a hardship, based on shape, slope, or soil of the land, not necessarily size, and something that is unusual to the zoning district itself. And since the majority or many of the lots in that same neighborhood are 75, 7,200, 12,000, 14,000 square feet, he would have to try to meet the criteria for a variance with the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is his option, but those are, historically, in most towns, difficult to obtain, so that would be his option whether he wanted to proceed. So the board has a decision that we have, that you have in your packets, basically a motion to deny based on the zoning change.
Okay, and this is a classic example why I never wanted the restriction on the size. I thought it was a beautiful design and very appropriate, but now that we're into it, so the motion is here to be read?
Yes, the November 29, 2018 draft. Since you're a little shorthanded, I'll be happy to read it for you. if you
I'm
would.
just trying to find it first. Yes, why don't you read it for us, because I haven't even found it yet, because my two readers aren't with me tonight.
Motion.
Charlotte, would you like to read it? Yes, why don't Charlotte? Yes, we'd like to keep
Very well.
team going.
I do read.
I know she reads.
And beautifully. No pressure.
Wait and see, vote. Judgments later. November 29th, 2018, motion that the planning board votes to deny the application of John Banner under Article 39 Site Plan Review of the zoning bylaw for a plan entitled Plot Plan for 7 Toledo Street, Falmouth, Mass. Assessors data 39A-22-000-004, prepared by Stephen Doyle and Associates, dated September 15th, 2018. Scale 1 inch to 20 feet, 1 sheet, along the first floor plans and architectural elevations for the detached structure entitled John Banner, 7 Toledo Street, Falmouth, prepared by Longfellow Builders. Scale is noted, dated September 18th, 2018, and a floor plan of the primary residence entitled New House for Mr. Banner, Toledo Street, Falmouth, Mass., prepared by Katuitt Bay Design, dated August 8, 2000. Scale 1/4 inch to 1 foot, with the following findings. Due to the recent vote of town meeting on November 15th, 2018, the town adopted the lot size requirement of a 7,500 square foot minimum for an accessory apartment to be added to a site in a residential and agricultural zoning district. Therefore, this application no longer meets the lot size requirement of the revised bylaw because of its 7,200 square foot lot size. Lot size was not considered prior to the change to the accessory apartment bylaw at the November 2018 town meeting. The applicant submitted the application material to the Planning Department on October 11, 2018. The positive motion at town meeting occurred on November 15, 2018, prior to the site plan review by the Planning Board at their November 20, 2018 meeting. The board reviewed the application at their meeting and asked for further information by town council as to the validity of the application after the change to the bylaw. Town council confirmed that the application was no longer valid because the applicant filed the application after the planning board advertised for the public hearings for the proposed change to the accessory apartment bylaw. The planning board advertised for the public hearing on September 7th and 14th in the Falmouth Enterprise. The applicant, John Banner, sought to construct an accessory apartment in a detached accessory garage located at 7 Toledo Street, which contains an existing single-family residence. The parcel is zoned Residential B, RB, and contains 7,200 square feet of land. The proposed accessory apartment within the garage is 269 square feet, containing one bedroom. The existing finished square footage of the primary residence is 1,454 square feet and contains 3 bedrooms. The proposed percentage of total floor area of the accessory apartment is 18.5% of the total finished floor area of the principal structure. For the above explained reasons, the planning board finds the site to be inadequate for the proposed application and shall inform the building commissioner of its decision.
That's the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
We discussed this at a previous meeting, and the applicant seems to be caught into particular dates. I realized the application was submitted in October, and the notice of the hearing was before that, but the decision wasn't made till after it. And we had some discussion last time, while it's important to follow the new bylaw, I think this is a unique situation we're not going to see again. And I'm curious whether the other members of the board would want to consider a waiver of that for this particular application only.
I would love to waive it, but I don't think we can. That is the problem. I don't believe we have, that's not a tool in our toolbox. I fought to keep it at no limit for a long time, and we were forced to go out and review it, and this is the change that the committee came up with, so we have to live with it.
There's also the consideration that Mr. Banner pointed out, that he's in a neighborhood, a large neighborhood of 7,200 square foot lot sizes. So this is, has implications for other landowners there. We would be better to maintain our own rules.
The only thing we could possibly do is next year drop it down to 7,200, because my understanding is there's a lot of these lots in Mara Vista. And I particularly thought his design was perfect. It looked pretty good. It was a small garage, little teeny apartment above, fit all the intents except for, does not fit the bylaw, and I'm afraid we have to take a vote on it.
And as you may have noticed in the housing production plan, one of those recommendations is to review the accessory apartment bylaw. So,
Again? Well, obviously we do. We made this change, and it, at least for this one, it was wrong, I think.
so we'll be back.
I think
I
we should be,
suppose.
I think we should be back. Well, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to have, actually, I asked this before. A couple of years ago, I had Brian do it. But I'd like to get a list of all the lots that are on the sewer that are 7,200 square feet that we're now between 72 and 75, that we're actually prohibiting this from ever happening. Because I don't believe that that was the intent of the bylaw. It was, yeah.
Could we at the same time, that, the study committee that looked at this included people from a number of different areas who are concerned with it, and I wonder if we could hear their rationale for 7,500. It might be important when we think about changing.
Well, I was involved in a little bit of discussion, and it was really a negotiated number. They wanted something, they didn't want a limit, and they wanted 10,000.
Right.
And I wouldn't agree to 10,000, because I knew that this condition existed. I didn't know this lot existed, but I knew
Right.
that somebody could build a small unit with a small garage and make it happen, because it's a 200. But anyways, I don't believe we have any options other than turning it down and bringing it back to town meeting again, if that's what we want to do, and use this as an example, if we want to go there. Anybody else?
Mr. Bott, do you have any, are we as constrained as it?
Yes, we, the board, essentially waiving some of our, some of that is actually a variance, which is the role of the zoning board of appeals. And a variance, as I said, is a difficult standard in Massachusetts. It relates to hardship, financial or otherwise, based on the shape, slope, or size of a parcel. That's not, what's the official language, it's not unique to the zoning district. But not affecting generally the zoning district in which it's located. So in the case of size, which is not one of the requirements under a variance, this would be endemic to the area where it's located at, because there are so many of these lots. When they talk about shape, if you want a variance for a setback and your lot is triangular shaped and setting the house back on the lot, you can't put the house into the building envelope on that triangular lot. That's reasons for a variance based on the shape. The slope, if it's a very steep grade and you're putting the house further back on the setback and it puts it into a hole, once again, basis for a variance if it's not unique to if it's unique to that particular lot and not the entire district. And then soil, if you going to put your foundation in and you find there's a giant ledge there and you can't put your building in where it should be because of these soil conditions, then you might get a variance to move the building to the side. But those variances are shape, slope, and soil. Size is not one of those parameters for a variance.
Well, I think the thing is, we've been trying to get additional housing in Falmouth, and this is a good example of it. And I would suggest that if we can get the list of properties less than 7,500 square feet,
No,
it would help us.
between 10, well, yes, you're right, between 7,500 and, well, whatever. That's what I always said.
Then we can perhaps propose a change to this later on.
What I always said, if it's on the sewer, it shouldn't be a problem, and if it's not on the sewer, the requirements for the Title V system and the reserve and setbacks was enough of a guarantee to make sure there's enough of a limitation, and if somebody could creatively find a little teeny apartment above the garage, God love them, let's do it. That was always been my position, but I was outvoted.
Okay.
I think we have to be really careful if we select a particular size lot, because we had 7,500, he has 72, and then somebody could have a 7,000 square foot lot that's perfectly adaptable for this, and then somebody comes in and says, well, I have 6,800 square feet, and my lot is a perfect, perfect state, perfect size. And so maybe, I'd like to see what the majority of lots are in that area and all Seward areas. And I think maybe the difference is, if there is a house now with an attached garage, that somebody could put an accessory apartment above it, as opposed to adding a separate building on a very small lot. Those two things are really different. One is, site plan review versus just by right. But I want to see this open so we can have as many possibilities as we can.
Well, this came up a few years ago when we were working on it, and I had the planner at the time, Brian, to give us that list, and it was developed. This is before you guys were on the board. This same argument has been here. I lost the argument, so this is why we ended up with it.
Well, maybe you wouldn't lose it again.
Maybe we won't, because if I really liked the looks of this building, I thought it fit the neighborhood perfectly, and it's only 200. So what is the number? It's a little teeny
300.
place. Anyways, I think we've beat this up enough. I hate to say this, but all in favor?
Well, wait a minute, I
Aye.
have
Okay,
one
more?
question. Where does that leave Mr. Banner?
I don't even want to use the words I would like to say.
I know. we won't say that, but
In the absence of a
Without a
variance-
paddle.
In the absence of a variance for the zoning board of appeals, he can't build an accessory housing unit. He can build a garage perhaps, but he can't build an accessory apartment because of the lot size.
But he could build a garage
Actually, he,
and then come back if he wanted
he
to put
could
something
put,
in
he
there.
could build a garage and he could put a bedroom and a studio there. He just can't put a stove.
That's right.
He can't make it a dwelling. If he meets lot coverage, maybe that's what he should do.
I'm not gonna go that far. I'm just saying.
No, but
He could build a
I'm
garage.
familiar with, I've done it. I know he can. If his septic system's the right size, he can put a bedroom up above. He has to build it to code. With the garage, you gotta put the fire-rated ceilings and do all the right things. And he could be sitting there, and if we ever decide to drop the bylaw, he could jump in, throw a stove, and get it done. So he does have a few options.
It's really a shame.
Well, tough business we have here. All set to vote? All set, John? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll see him, hopefully in the future. Okay, the next item on the agenda is planning board decision, review and approve housing production plan. Anybody have anything new on this? I think we've reviewed this quite a bit. This is a decision.
I just have a question.
Go ahead.
We had a meeting on this, and this refers to the plan dated December. We should have a date in there, but does that incorporate the changes that were discussed during that public hearing?
Yes.
I didn't look at two of them, but I suggest we put a date in there, whatever the date of that is. It says December, but
If I may, the previous draft was October 2018.
Right.
And so this most recent draft, December 2018. In addition to the planning board, the selectmen would also have to adopt a plan and send to DHCD. So the actual final date that it's approved by all the requisite boards and the state probably isn't going to be December. So December 18th is the date of the draft. So if it was just a board, one board, it would be pretty easy to put a flat-out December 11th date on it. But I think given the life that this still has to go through and the places it has to go to, I'm comfortable myself with the December.
So we don't have a written motion, we're just approving it.
You have a written motion.
yeah.
Okay, must be way back at the bottom of mine.
It actually looks a lot like that.
It was handed
I
out.
can read.
Go ahead, Paul, jump on it.
I can read.
You
if I
can
may.
read? Yeah.
Absolutely, John, I'm sorry, I thought we had beat this up before. Please.
So, for the housing.
Oh, yes, this is important.
The housing production plan, I reviewed it, and it's really an extensive plan, well done. There's some parts to it that I'd like to just make the public aware of, and also our board, if they're not aware of it. So, and on page 56, it says that the town of Falmouth, by the year 2025, will need 5,308 units of housing for home ownership, and 623 rental units, affordable. Excuse me, affordable up to 120% of the medium housing income. So that's a lot. That's 5,931 new units that this town's gonna need in 7 years, according to this housing production study. So I broke this down a little bit, because on another page, it talks about trying to meet the 10% requirement for 40B developments. And it says on page 65 that currently the town of Falmouth needs 528 more affordable units to reach the 10% level, so that we could, as a community, have an objection to a 40B development if we did have an objection. Also states that there's approximately 305 housing units that aren't on the subsidized housing inventory that they think will get put on the subsidized housing inventory. So to meet the 10%, that would make that number of new units come down to 223. And that's to meet the 10%. So I was thinking that we have 8 villages in the town of Falmouth. We have East Falmouth, we have Hatchville, North Falmouth, T-Ticket, Wacoit, West Falmouth, and Woods Hole. So I was thinking if we took the 223 units to meet the 10% and divided it by the 8 villages, that the town of Falmouth would require only 28 new units per village. 28 affordable units per village to meet the 10% requirement. And I know that's nowhere near 5,931 housing units that this study says is going to be required. And that's up to 120% of your median income. But I think it's a start. So I think that at some point in the future, each one of these villages has an association. Maybe they can meet with us, or we can meet with them and start a plan to see where they would like to have 28 units located, and see if we could zone it that way, get it approved. And each village would have only 28 more units, and affordable, and we can meet this 10%. So that was one of my thoughts. And then, of course, it talks about that the future priority for rentals, the study feels, is going to be for seniors. Because we have a lot of seniors that are getting to the point where they would actually have a smaller rental unit than live in the home that they're currently in. They're going to undergrow their homes. So they feel the need is going to be more for seniors than it is going to be for the younger people, because the study feels that the younger people aren't going to be able to afford to live here, so they're going to be leaving and leaving and leaving, and we won't have them here that need a house. So that's another part that I found very interesting. And then it talks about density, of course. We have to have more density, and we have to consider our zoning. And, excuse me, has multiple pages where it talks about a 40R zoning district.
Right.
Which is, I think, similar to what we've been discussing for the district on Main Street,
Davis Straits.
Davis Straits. And it has, goes into quite a bit of detail about the 40R. And it says that, I'm going to read this, it allows local option to adopt overlay districts near transit, areas of concentrated development, commercial districts, rural districts, and suitable locations. It allows as-of-right residential development of minimum allowable densities, provides at least 20% of the units be affordable, promotes mixed use and infill development, provides 2 types of payments from the state to the municipalities. One is based on the number of projected housing units in the district, another for each unit that receives a building permit, and also encourages open space and protects historic district. And the governor and the legislative body is funding quite a bit, and they want to see housing throughout the whole state. I think this is something that, as a board, we should look into and see if we could apply it to our town. And I want to give one final example. I'm currently doing a development in East Falmouth, and it's 26 acres. So 26 acres is a pretty good-sized parcel. And when I started working on ideas for the development, I met with Mass Housing and to see about doing a 40B development. And their recommendation to me was they wanted to see 12 units per acre. So 12 units per acre would have brought me in around 300 units. They wanted them to be rental units. And it sounds like a lot, 300 sounds like a lot, 26 acres sounds like a lot. And, but when you look at what was approved on Main Street for a 40B development, it was 100-some units on, what is an acre and a half of land. So the density, we have to have density to make this work, the housing work for our community. But I'm just showing that I had 26 acres. They wanted me to do 300 units. How many did I wind up getting approved by the town of Falmouth from this board, which I met all the guidelines?
Was it this board or the
This
Z
board,
Z
the
board?
planning board.
Okay.
20 units. I have 20 residential units on 26 acres
How long ago was that it was approved?
last year, well, a year and a half ago. So I'm just showing you that the state wants density. We have room for density, but our community has not wanted the density. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in. So,
But just to be clear, you applied under the cluster zoning
I did.
law and
plan-
only
plan
asked for the
residential
20.
development.
We didn't turn you down and make you do it.
No, but this is.
Yeah,
what
that
I
was a
just-
nice, a
as
very
an-
beautiful cluster development,
Yes, as an
which keeps everything at with the zoning. What a cluster development does is we make the lots smaller and have open space, but it's still units per acre. It's still one acre per lot.
Yes, it's 1 acre per lot.
And that's what you applied
So
for.
I have 20 new homes being built there, 16 acres of open space, which is all wonderful,
Fantastic.
but there's 280 people that are looking for a place to live that don't have it because I didn't do the 300 units. And I didn't do the 300 units because I don't,
Didn't want to fight for 6 years.
I didn't want to work that hard, to be honest with you. So it would take me a long time to build 300 units, and
I know I have a client that recently did 5.5 units per acre, and they had to fight for a long, long time to get it approved.
but
It's going to be very difficult.
I don't want to lose sight here. I really think that if we look at the 40R, some districts for 40R, and we really think about breaking this down to maybe 28 affordable units per village, that's something that can be accomplished and maybe get the town to the 10% or close to the 10%, because we're going to have other developments that are going to come to town that are going to be affordable, that'll get permitted. So I just looked at this housing production plan, and I tried to break it down to make it more palatable and something we can actually accomplish. Other than that, I'm in full support of it.
I want to point out that that little picture there is 20 units per acre, so people who are afraid of what density looks like, I believe that that is a beautiful addition to our village, and it's walking distance to the beach, to town, public transportation, and on the sewer. And if we still have to fight to get to, a little bit of density in our village, we're never gonna meet the goal. But I think what we're saying is we're all in favor of this plan, we just wanted to weigh in a little bit.
And in this housing production plan, this is an example of a 40R.
They're calling for it. Everything in the plan is calling for,
That's the,
what, not only this, but also, on a parallel course, we need to do the multifamily district overlay that doesn't deal with all the issues that a form-based code in a village does, but just allowing 12 or 10 or some amount per acre. It's an overlay that'll give some relief to some of these applicants. Tom, you wanted to?
Yeah, just to expand, if I may, a little on John's point about 40R. We did a 40R zoning in town I was in previously. A 100-acre sand pit next to an MBTA station. Not a better spot on the planet to do transit-oriented development. That particular area would have had 720 units of housing. This is a town of 15,000 people. So there would be 720 units of housing on this 100-acre gravel sand pit next to the commuter rail station, 250,000 square foot of non-residential space, and 50,000 square foot of retail space. No space larger than 50,000 square feet, because you're looking for, smaller, or no retail space larger than 25,000 square feet to keep, smaller and not large-scale retail. Under the zoning, the state gave cut the town a check for $600,000 upon adopting the zoning, because it had more than 500 units. Under 40R, for each unit you build, whether it's market or affordable, the state sends another check for $2,500 for each unit produced. Under 40S, as part of the bylaw, if that new development impacts your school funding, under 40S, there's a formula where they supplement some of your school funding as well. Previously, I had sent the board the design standards that we put together for the 40R, the previous 40R that we had done, and they're not guidelines, they're standards. So there's a possibility to sort of dovetail form-based code and 40R, because you have essentially the building forms and the streetscapes and things like that. So it's one of those things I certainly think we should be looking into as we move forward with trying to create some additional housing, and it's by right. You adopt it by right, by site plan approved, typically by the planning board. Those densities that the state looks for are between 8 and 20 units per acre. 20 units largely for multifamily, something akin to this. So there's some parallels, and as we go forward in looking at those sort of things, it's sort of the carrot approach to doing affordable housing. 40B being the stick, 40R being the carrot, the town opts into this. And for their cooperation, the state supports with those one-time payments. Three fiscal analyses that we did at the time to determine what the impact for delivery of services versus tax rate, all showed them to be revenue neutral, if not revenue positive, because the majority of the units were 1 and 2 bedroom units. So there's less of an impact of school children and things like that. And that's typically what you would see by the train station, because you want that sort of higher density and that mix of units. There's 3 bedrooms in there as well. And much like with the Davis Straits plan that we've been looking at, the higher density is by the train station, and as you tail off towards the town proper, those become more smaller, single-family cottage-type units and 3 bedrooms and things like that. So there's a lot of different tools out there. 40R being is one of them.
What did you do about septic sewage?
There's a wastewater treatment plant across the street. Like I said, it's a great spot. Interesting enough, their wastewater treatment plant is also at the top of a hill. But there was a sewer plant across the street. They would have to expand the sewer plant. It was a big ticket item, but essentially when you're at 200, 300 units, something like that, that's typically the threshold for when someone's gonna look at putting in a package plant. So whether you're developing, whether you're contributing to expand a municipal plant, or you've got sufficient density that it warrants the ability to create a package plant, that's an option. Under 40R, the town has to certify that the infrastructure is in place to support the development. So if you don't have that sewage capacity, a lot of those discussions take place with pre-development agreements with the developer. Most of the things come to fruition because there's a developer who's interested in the property and you're working with them, as opposed to the town sort of crafting their own. So most of the ones that have been successful, much like the Cottage Park in Plymouth, have a property owner or developer who's interested in moving the ball on that.
So my question is, it just seems to me, and I could be totally wrong, that whenever I bring up a sewage treatment plant, everyone goes, oh, no, we don't do those here. So I just need to understand that, because I would love to see, and I talk about Avalon because it's the one that's most familiar to me, where a developer comes in and builds an Avalon of 300, however many, and there's always a sewage treatment plant that goes with it, because a lot of the towns in Middlesex County don't have that sewage capacity, or they don't have enough. The plant itself isn't large enough.
Well,
So,
our local comprehensive plan focuses on the village centers, convenient village centers, where to build. And we did that because in the long-range plan of the town, that's where the public transportation and the sewers are. The problem we've run in is now this flow-neutral bylaw, they're getting ready to shut off any growth on the sewer. And so I think one of the things we need to move housing and any other type of development is the selectmen need to get going on how they're gonna solve the problem with the sewer treatment plant. I mean, it's an outflow permit with the state, isn't that the issue?
As I understand it, when you get to 80% of your capacity, you have to plan for how you're gonna max out the rest of your capacity.
And they haven't done that.
And the constraint here is, where do you dump the effluent? Because it's, and so they've got to figure out, is that an outfall out to sea? Is that an outfall out of the nitrogen in areas?
My understanding is our sewage treatment plant has lots of capacity to treat it. What we don't have the capacity is for the outfall. And I think in order to solve all our housing problems, especially if we're gonna do Davis Straits or anything else, that issue has to be resolved. But that's a selectmen's issue, a part of their 5-year strategic plan, and that should be in it. Charlotte?
Each time we discuss this, we all find ourselves in agreement that several plans sound very, very good, but we don't move forward on any one of them. And it might be good to narrow this down to something that we can act on. And if we were to do a multifamily overlay district in Davis Straits, as we've discussed, that would spur the conversation toward solving the sewage problem if it needs to be solved in order to do that. But we can take that action. And I want to bring back to your attention, Pam somewhat, and myself had worked on this multifamily draft for discussion some time ago, and it was based on what the Cape Cod Commission advised us to do in the Davis Straits plan. So it's just taking what they had already advised us to do in an area they've already delineated very carefully and applying it. And were we to do this, remember in Davis Straits, it's not all the same. There are different areas laid out. So there's sort of a village area and a neighborhood commercial area and a business area. So there'd be different ones. And for the density, which John has brought up so well, what this suggestion, we're hoping the board would act on, by right, from 5 dwelling units per acre in village and neighborhood commercial areas to 12 dwelling units per acre in residential mixed use by special permit up to 30 dwelling units per acre, so that it would find in there, and yet another point I want to get to, I hope that we aren't going to just lose this, that we'll be able to work from it, maybe put in some other of the funding things that would make it possible to do, but we would take some action on it relatively soon, so that we've pushed the other boards that need to act forward on it. Last time we talked about Davis Straits, Jim, I might have misunderstood something you said, because you referred to the area up there around Walmarts and so forth, which it's my understanding that's not in the Davis Straits reset area exactly. The reset area goes, and I printed out some of their maps, so that just to refresh our memories, it just goes up Davis Straits, and if you were heading east on Davis Straits, it goes only one layer back from Davis Straits on the side heading toward Dillingham, but it goes up to Stop and Shop Corner, up and around Worcester Court, and back down around on Spring Bars. It's not that big an area, but it includes, in fact, John, I bet because you have property there, you know exactly how many acres are in there.
The Davis Street,
Right, within the reset area that we've been discussing all along.
I do not know how many.
I
acres.
thought it covered Walmart, it even
No.
discusses, well,
It also includes,
it's a secondary plan. In the Davis Straits study, it does
it
mention
is
the
a
Walmart.
secondary plan, but the outlined area and the area I thought that we've been discussing all along would leave that part, because the hope in the Cape Cod Commission's plan is because Walmart and its entire asphalted parking area was built on wetlands. And what they really want is the reclamation of that wetland. And you would only use the sort of the perimeter, the more uphill perimeter of that for multifamily housing. But this area within the primary Davis Straits area, a great deal of it could be used for housing, because if you take in the build to line, bringing the parking lot area in front of the 99 and so forth on that side, and on the Falmouth Mall side, up to the build to line, you could get mixed-use buildings all along that, as well as up through, is it Rose Street, I think it's called? Through that area. There's a lot of land there.
There is.
If we concentrate on this instead of letting the conversation get bigger and bigger, we might be able to get something done.
Well, I was actually trying to make it smaller and smaller by biting off a small piece just to showing how it can be done. And then, once that's done, the logistics of moving it to another parcel become that much easier.
We're going
But
in the
we're
same
agreement.
direction.
Let's
Yeah.
vote, let's move this along. We're holding,
On the
we're getting off.
housing
on-
production
Yeah,
plan.
we're on the housing production plan.
Actually, if we can just carry this conversation one more, a couple more minutes. Jim and I had a conversation with the folks from the Cape Cod Commission about producing some additional zoning for us for the Davis Straits area.
Right.
And so Jim and I reached out to Heather. I talked to Julian Sousa, the town manager, and so the Cape Cod Commission is actually putting something together for us to consider as a potential zoning application for the area here. So they're in the midst of doing their regional policy plan, and so right after they get the regional policy plan put to bed, in January, we'll be sitting down with the Cape Cod Commission, talking about a scope of services for creating additional zoning for the area down there as well.
I think we talked about that at our last meeting.
We did.
We did.
We need to vote on this plan, though.
Yes, so, one more comment before we approve this.
We're a bit off topic, we're talking about the housing production plan,
Well,
but
these are all how, every one of these items is mentioned in the housing production plan.
Right.
They didn't miss a thing.
I don't want to cut off this discussion, I think we need to have it at another time. But I just wanted to make one comment on density. We had 2 projects in the last year that was approved by this planning board. When I went to zoning board of appeals, they reduced the number of units in each of those properties. One in particular was the one, the Habitat, which was obviously a 40B project. So I don't know what the logic was, but they just felt it was too dense, and it didn't appear to be so, as John pointed out.
Well, I think if we do create a multifamily overlay district and show that the zoning board, that the town meeting's ready to approve greater density in some areas, maybe they'll start going along with what our comprehensive plan is for, and developing greater density in our village centers.
Can I read the motion?
Go ahead.
Oh, just one more
No.
thing, Jen, only take
No.
a sec. I think that we should congratulate the town's new housing coordinator on a good plan and working it through so many committees to get to this point. Well done.
Well done.
Thank you.
Who was that?
We think you're terrific,
Carly
Carla, is
Fiona.
the bottom
Yes.
line.
You should mention a name.
Carly Fiona. I can't pronounce it correctly.
Baroni. Thank you,
Baroni,
sorry.
there.
Motion. Move that the planning board pursuant to 760 CMR 56.04, parentheses 4, quote, housing production plans, unquote, and the guidelines developed by the Department of Housing and Community Development adopt the Falmouth Housing Production Plan dated December 2018, prepared by Karen Sonneborg, Housing and Planning Consultant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you
I
have-
was just going to say, I think it's more than the housing consultant. I think it should be the office of,
Right.
I mean, it wasn't, she didn't do it alone. I think this should be enlarged as a housing consultant.
Want to
And-
modify the motion?
Yeah, I'd like to add the, what's her title?
Housing coordinator,
Housing coordinator.
And her
Carly
name,
Fiorina.
and her name, yes.
And
Fine.
housing coordinator, Falmouth Housing Coordinator.
Okay, we'll add that to the motion. You got that, Tom?
I do.
You guys ready?
Aye.
Opposed, none? Thank you very much for all your hard work. Sorry you had to listen to so much of that, but,
It's important.
Yep.
And I appreciate you taking the time for the discussion.
I want you to know that
Ed?
we've been working on housing for quite a few years. It's part of the goals of the local comprehensive plan, and the accessory apartment bylaw was it. The next one is the multifamily overlay district, and then we're morphing into Davis Straits, so it's where we have been focusing a lot of our energy. So good luck, and we'll all work together to see if we can get some of this done. And every village should look for their 28 units.
That's right.
I think that's a really good thing, and we should
It's a very good idea.
get that word out, that they all have to come back with a plan.
The modern version of 40 acres and a mule, maybe.
I think we ought to put it out as a challenge and get the first village, and then the challenge to the second and third and fourth and fifth, and however many villages we have here.
It only takes a couple of acres per village, and we can get this done.
And it only takes a village.
Okay, moving along.
Don't leave.
Zoning recodification, codification working group. So, Tom, you want to report on this?
Yes, if I may. We had a conversation with Town Council Frank Duffy and Town Manager Julian Suso about creating a working group so we can move through some of the minutia of the zoning recodification rather than have an hour and a half televised meeting about semicolons, important as they are. So that working group tentatively that Frank is looking at putting together would include a couple members of the planning board, a member of the zoning board of appeals, the town planner, our new zoning zoning administrator, building commissioner, Rod Palmer, and associate town council. So we'd be looking at putting together a working group so we could work with our consultants and not have to be concerned about, do we have a quorum, do we not have a quorum, to get those things done, and then bring those changes back to the board. So Frank and I talked about that last week. We're trying to follow up on wrapping that up, but that's where we're headed for right now, rather than have those repeating what we did. And this was sort of sponsored by Bob Mitchell, our consultant, who said usually there's a committee who does something like this. So we're just looking at the proper makeup of the committee and the proper creation of it to make sure that we're not doing anything untoward under the open meeting law and things like that.
And therefore, they're appointing it now?
As soon as Frank and I get a chance to circle back around and sit down again for a couple hours. and sort that out. We'll formalize that.
So if you're interested, let us know. Okay.
And I bet Pat is.
I bet Pat is too, yeah. I think we're gonna put Pat on it anyway, so we'll deal with that at the time comes.
Yeah.
Him too.
Pam as well. All right. That's great. We have competition for those two positions. Okay. We've already discussed David Straits. I just asked the board if I've done a little math. If you want to talk about it for 5 minutes, we can, or I could do it another time. I just did a hypothetical redevelopment of that block of land and showing what impact it has on, again, in 5 minutes, I can go over some math, or we can talk about it another night. Do you have, I have,
Oh, I'd love
I
to
have
do
a
it
quick-
now.
I always want to keep David Straits on, so every night, if we want to talk about it,
John,
we don't get prohibited.
John,
So anyways, I just want to point out, what this is Staples is going away. Everything else there in the plaza is still there. And so all these units are in there, so
Jim, how much land are you talking about that Staples has?
I know it's 20 units per acre, so I'd have to do the math back if somebody wants to do it real quick. 54 units, and it's 20 units per acre, and you get to it. I don't know the answer to that question, but that's how,
About 2.5 acres.
yeah, it's a small piece of land. And it's all pavement. So it's all pavement, it's on the sewer, it's walking distance to everything.
And Staples isn't going away, they're gonna relocate.
Well, Staples would relocate. There'll be 4,500 square feet of retail space in these buildings. They could, a smaller Staples could fit in there, no problem at all. This, if you look closely, they have Starbucks and Friendly's, and they could put a Staples, a smaller Staples in there. The idea is they're getting away from the big box stores. Big box stores are a little bit of trouble. You know, they're getting hit with Amazon, the trends and everything. So smaller brick and mortar mixed use is the trend that's going around the country.
So
Jim,
how
could
many
you-
housing units in that, Jim?
I'm gonna bring you that to exactly where I'm going right now, but this is just math, no pretty pictures. Okay?
Jim,
The-
before you get there, could you please explain how hypothetical this is?
It's really not all that hypothetical. We are planning to hire the Cape Cod Commission to write the request for proposal to make this happen this year.
Right, but it would require the owners of the property would need, to-
That's why we're here right now, and I'm gonna show
Okay.
you why, that's exactly why we're here right now, is to talk about that.
right, thank you.
Okay, that's this whole point. Here's the existing properties. I went through and I took off the assessor's records the size of Friendly's, Starbucks, and Staples. They add up to 30,000 square feet. I talked with appraisers and other developers and came up with rents for it. Friendly's at $30 a square foot, Starbucks at 30, and Staples at 15. The reason being, when you have a great big space there, they don't rent it at the same premiums the little spaces do. Little spaces, and they were recently marketing stuff at $15 a square foot right next door. So that's where those numbers came from. And the proposed unit that they gave us on the plan they had up before, that 4,500 square foot of retail, 17 walk-up units in the mixed use, 4 buildings with 2 units each, a manor house, double-deckers, townhouses, and duplexes for a total of 52 units, or 20 units per acre. And I did some quick math on that. The existing, how we value real estate is, my plan here is to show the developers that by doing this, their land will be more valuable. And so they'll be incentivized to join it, to join in and do it. I would value not the whole parcel, but just this one parcel we were talking about before, at about $8 million, because it makes $533,000 a year. Investors are looking for a minimum of a 6% return. How you create returns to value, you divide it, and it comes up with an indicated value of $8,800,000. That's just the way it works. I would be glad to go in detail later. On the proposed development, we've got 4,000 500 square feet of retail, and because they're small little stores, boutiques with apartments above them and coffee shops, I'm putting a $35 a square foot value on the rent, because it'll be nicer, brand new, little shops get more money than big shops. It's just the way the business is. And all the 52 units, and if you average 1,500, now some of these are gonna be small units, probably at $800, and some of them are gonna be larger units at $2,000. This year, I've got several units on Main Street, second floor apartments, walk up, $2,000 rent, people are waiting in line for them. It's there, so the market rate units, this would be mixed use with a lot of affordable, at least to, whatever, 20% affordable.
20%.
20% affordable, so I'm using an average of 15 a month. That makes $78,000 a month for all of them, or $963,000 a year. Add up the retail plus the residential, that's over $1 million in income on it. And if you cap, I didn't do the cap rate, but I can just do it real quick for you to show how I convert to value. You go plus, you take the $1 million, and you divide it by the return rate that most investors are looking at is 6%, and I know this is a real estate thing, but that's $18,225,000. So the owners of the property, if they invest in this, add $10 million to the value of their property. And that's the argument that I've always been trying to make. How are we gonna get them to do it? Now, it may not be enough, because they may have to spend $10 million to build it, or even more. But that's where we can go to groups, incentives. They're building a building in New York right now. They they wanted a high-rise, affordable building. They gave the developer 35 years of no taxes on it, and the developer building a brand-new high-rise, all affordable property. That's how we do it, by coming with some kind of incentives.
How do you factor in the transition costs? Because during construction, they're not going to be anywhere. And what would it take, 18 months? I mean, there's a
Yes.
transition cost
I haven't put
here.
the cost of development in here yet, okay? And there's a lot of things. There's downtime, vacancy, all during that. I didn't really want to go into the whole thing. I just wanted to get the notion that at the end of the day, you're creating $10 million more in value for the property owner. They're going from a value of $8 million to a value of $18 million. I think that's going to be enough to get their attention. We may have to add in tax incentives with the affordable housing people. There could be subsidies. There could be 40, what's the?
40R?
40R may have some of the, there's all different kinds of incentives. I just wanted to give a quick snapshot so that people understand that the created value that's here. And this is just very rudimentary. And I didn't want to go on length, but I just wanted to just show what that plan we were looking at before, as opposed to,
And that's just a small part of the Davis.
it's only 10 of the Davis Straits plan. If you look at this, see this little circle right here? This is the part I'm talking about. And this is the Davis Straits. It's not even 10% of it. It's a very, very small portion of it that we're focusing on, and it creates. And we're taking a parking lot, look at that. And this is what the existing is. And
And this is just the 2.5 acres that
this is,
Staples is on.
yes, it's less than 10% of the Davis Straits, creates 52 units. If you apply it over the whole thing, in fact, there's a big piece of vacant land right next to this parcel, it's woods. If you would, you can see it a little bit in that picture. If you would tie that into this, we'd be creating 84 units in 1 year. And if we do 84 units, we only need 75 units in one year to get exemption from the 40B law. It accomplishes the goal right there. So it's just something to really focus on, and I just wanted to, I'm more of a math person than checking spelling and semicolons, so I wanted to just point that out, that I think that this has fundamental integrity on the mathematics and the economy of it to make it work, and I just wanted to just show you the math. Thank you very much for that time.
Jim,
Yes.
are you and Tom maybe thinking of getting those owners together and talking to them about?
Yes, I have mailed two of the owners, the two primary owners already seen, I've sent them the Davis Straits plan twice. They've been invited to a stakeholders meeting, they didn't come. The next one, I'm gonna personally invite them, call them up and drag them there. I think that what's gonna force them to the table is the market trends. The big box stores are losing to Amazon. And their rents, and the rents are going down. The last time they did a deal in the Planet Fitness or something there, I think it was at $15 a square foot. No one's really looking for the big 20,000, 30,000 square foot boxes anymore. And so the tenants aren't doing it. Look at what you hear in the news. Sears is closing, all the big stores, they're all closing to go into smaller, mixed-use type things. So I think we're on the right side of a trend here, and hopefully we'll get the Cape Cod Commission design the RFP, and we'll take this piece of it and move it forward.
Are they local? Are the owners local?
They originally, yes, they're, it's owned, one family, no. One family that I know, I'm working with them on local properties right now. I've known them for a long time. The other one's a big New York REIT. And I have sent them the plans, talked to them about it, crickets. But when I'm hoping when they see the map, they say, wait a minute, maybe we would better pay attention. We could add $10 million. And not only that, this is $10 million for this one little piece of it. If you do the whole thing and you extrapolate that out, it's,
Plus the increase in annual revenue.
right, well,
It's not just the value of the property, it's the increase
right.
in the
It
annual
depends what their goal. If they want to sell it, they're looking at, the increase in value. But if they want long-term hold, and they want to hold it for 10 years, and they've got a bunch of retired people that want that income, and they said, hey, let's get it that extra $10 million. So the goal is to try to incentivize them financially, and we might have to do some subsidies, like tax abatements or other things, but it's too early to put that into a math computation. I just wanted to show it. Yes, Charlotte?
It's possible for them to phase it in. They can keep except for the Friendlies and Starbucks, they can keep the existing stores
Sure.
going.
Yeah, this is,
While they
what's
build
here
the
right now.
multi-use
Let's
ones
see
right
this
along the
building right here?
road.
That's Andy's Barber Shop and the hairdresser and Olympia Sports.
Right.
They're in this wing, and the whole other development is still there. So,
And they could walk to
see, here's a plan view of it. This is the acreage I talked about. You can easily see how you could take this residential component and slide it into this portion right here and get another 30 or 40 units just in this plan here. And then we can move down, and it's a very small part of Davis Straits. And I think it's something that, when I saw this plan from Cape Cod Commission, I said, wow, that's exactly what we were talking about at the local comprehensive plan. And I think they did a really good job of understanding what we're trying to get at. So, and I've had conversations with Union Studios, and they're looking forward to be bidding on the package. They're the ones that came up with this little plan. They were the ones that Cape Cod Commission hired to do this little study. So in January, Tom says he's going to get a letter to the Cape Cod Commission from him and from Julian Suso. They're going to put out an RFP for an architectural firm to actually give us a proposal on how much it's going to cost to do this, to put this proposal. And then the hard work comes. Once we pick a company to do it, then we start the meetings with the local neighbors, the charrettes, what size buildings do we want? This is only a small part of it, but the good part of it is the Cape Cod Commission has already sent out a big questionnaire about what people are looking for buildings, and this plan is what they, most of the people liked. Are those building types, did you all answer that questionnaire? Well, these buildings were on it, and that's where it came from that questionnaire. So that's a rough look at the process. It's gonna be a year or 2 or 3 of hard work. A lot of reaching out to a lot of meetings, a lot of people, and I'm up for it. I hope you all are.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much for letting me speak to you about this.
Could I-
Yes.
That's not the only possible layout on that.
No, it's not.
On that.
It's
So that
just-
if the owners wanted, if the current owners wanted to be able to get a higher return on their existing property, all that asphalted part now, the empty frontage really along Davis Straits, it would be so much easier to build that first.
Yeah, right here. This area up there.
Exactly.
Yes.
All along there, to do that first, and that would probably lead to a different layout of the streets on the interior part, if you were
could, but
facing
we
it.
got to hire the pro, I'm not in a position to answer that question. That's why we're going to go for
No,
the
I
design
just
professionals.
wanted to bring out that there's flexibility possible. It's not this plan or nothing.
No, it's not this plan or nothing. This is just a concept, it's just paper.
Yeah.
We'll be reaching out to the neighbors. The plan goes, Davis Straits is, a part of it has the hotel coming down, okay? This hotel here is in the floodplain. The
Right.
Falmouth Harbor the river came through all the way here over to Morris Pond. There was green space all in through here, because this is all fun. There's so many different components of it. I was only trying to focus on a small
One
piece of
part.
it, just to show what could happen with it and how we could do that. And we'll have the opportunity, Charlotte, to express your ideas with the consultants when they come here, and you can ask them that question of how big this should be, whether it should we try to do the whole thing, or is it better to do a small thing and carry it forward, a small area, and show, here's an example, and then make the overlay and then move it down over the properties. But 80 units could be made in this section right here, if you throw this land over here into it. Because there's 50 here, and you could get another 30 here, get 80 units, and our housing production plan calls for 75 units per year, and this is less than 10% of Davis Straits. So we could immediately solve the problem of not dealing with 40Bs that we don't want if we just keep this plan going down the road for the next 10 years. And there's a way out. It's going to take a lot of fortitude from our town to move
And
this
yet,
forward.
one of the strengths of John's idea of dividing the number that's needed by the number of villages is that it spreads equitably the low-income housing to every village and town. It's not concentrated in one place, and that seems to me a socially stronger idea. This, not to take away from this, I'm very, really committed to seeing the multifamily housing district right here, but not to take away from also having all the villages involved.
Absolutely, I think we ought to
Yeah.
do both of them.
Yeah.
But I have a question. Is that other land that's vacant, where
Yes.
is that in single ownership?
Yes. And I know they actually own the land across the street that has a 40B approval on it that's going through, that has been approved by everybody, but it has been appealed by a neighbor. But it's part of the Davis Straits. Yes, they own this land, they own the land across the street, and I found out by doing this study, because I got all the landowners together, they actually own, the coffee shop there, Starbucks.
Starbucks.
It's an old family name, Helmus. They used to be property owners here generations ago, and I'm dealing with the grandchildren. But they owned some of this land, they've owned it for probably 50, 60 years. Tom?
If I could just clarify something Charlotte just said, we're not talking about low-income housing. Affordable housing is 80% of the median income. So essentially what a family of four that makes $64,000 a year makes. Affordable housing is not low-income housing. You can get into 30, 40, 50% of the area median income, but typically under 40B, that's 80% of the median income. So affordable housing and workforce housing is not low-income housing. I don't know where low-income housing, because I don't know how those folks find a place to live. But affordable housing is typically 80% of median income, area median income. So it's affordable. It's the poster child for those sort of developments are the school teacher. In fact, it says in our housing production plan, that kindergarten teacher, the firefighters and things like that. So it is not low income, it is affordable. And for a lot of people, they can't afford the affordable because it's all tied to the area's median income.
And this should help with work. The beauty of this location is there's second and third floor. If you look at these, there's some first floor, second or third floor. There could be some very small 500 square foot. Somebody was talking about a 270 square foot unit that they want to put up the garage. These could be very small units. The studios are one bedrooms for our workers because they could get out, then they could walk everywhere. You know, the days, one of the things that people have brought up to me is in 20 years from now, that we may have driverless cars. That's a real possibility. They just call up and the car comes gets you.
Talking about that on NPR this morning.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of things, the trends that are coming in our way and coming in our direction and not in our way that I think we're going in the right direction. And I'm very excited about, when I saw this, I realized, boy, somebody was listening to us, because this is exactly what we were talking about in our local comprehensive plan, and we wanted to get the Cape Cod Commission to put it on paper, because I could never draw this. I could talk about it, but I could dream about it, but I couldn't draw it.
You know, in the plan, when they talk about the need for seniors to be in these units, if we don't get young people to come back and live here, then seniors aren't going to be able to stay here, because there will be no one to take care of them. And unless they move off Cape and go to live with their kids or something, you know, we have to do everything we can, including high-speed internet, to get young families to move back here.
And probably the most important message we could get to the selectmen is they have to deal with the sewer issue. It's already happening. I don't know, in the business that I work in, I had to apply for the last 3 commercial things we did. I've already had to apply for the variance. We've reached the 80%, and they're already having hearings on whether or not, and they're very close to shutting down any future development. And we got to deal with the traffic issues. The last thing I wanted to say is this plan only works if you think about 3 things. 1, you want to create the housing. 2, you want to have complete streets, because there's no way, if we don't deal with the traffic issues, we just can't build. We've got to design the traffic to get in and out. And 3rd, you got to be in favor of smart growth. Because if you're not in favor of smart growth and you say, why don't we just build 800 units out in Hatchville someplace and leave this beautiful parking lot we have downtown alone, which I think it's a shame. The other thing is, some of these buildings are housing on all floors, so there are some senior housing opportunities here on ground floor as well. It's not all retail. So, and it can be anything we want. One thing about form-based code is we don't tell them what you have to do inside the building. We tell them the shape, the size, the windows, the doors, how it's gonna look, and they can put whatever they want into it. We can say we want it to be housing, that's a little bit different, but the true form-based code is don't talk about the use. Let the developer do what they want. But if we want to create housing, we could say, but you have to put 54, 52 units in this, 20 units per acre. We could make that minimum. And that's how you get it done. You say, you do whatever you want, but by the way, you got to have 20 units per acre housing, and then you can do whatever you want. Thank you. I went a lot longer than 5 minutes, but I appreciate the time to address you on these issues. Thank you very much. I'll put my pretty picture back up. Where is it? Oh, well, it's not this one.
I'll buy into that, Reed.
Go right to here. I'd like to leave this one up here. For 3 years, when we were working on developing the light industrial C, we had all those whole walls and these walls all covered with pictures of all the industrial land. So anytime we wanted to talk about it, we could just point.
That's good.
So now hopefully we'll keep this up to keep it in front of us. Okay, I really appreciate that. General correspondence.
If I could just touch on
You
a
have a couple letters here, Tom. Go ahead.
Yes, one is an email that I had forwarded to you earlier regarding the Charter Commission. The Charter Commission is having their next meeting on December 17th, and they had some questions related to planning and the planning board and the functions of that. So I had forwarded that information to you folks. I apologize for not having it on the agenda, so we can't get into a discussion about it, but if you would take a look at those questions that have been presented by the Charter Committee in your emails, reply to anything that you like, send it back to me, and I'll be happy to bring those thoughts to the Charter Review meeting December 17th. I had also, just a byproduct of working for 20 years with Monday planning board meetings, the memo that I had sent you about possible town meeting changes, all had Monday dates on them, not Tuesday dates. So our official meeting schedule for January is January 8th, which is the second Monday. January 8th and January 22nd are the regularly scheduled meetings. I had suggested meeting on the 15th as well in order to get zoning articles reviewed, discussed in a final format, in order to have them properly ready for town meeting before the warrant closes on January 18th. So based on the things we had in the memo, those zoning articles we had talked about, I'm sort of steaming towards having those things put together. But I would want to clarify that for whatever reason, I put Monday dates in, so those are the dates for those articles. And they include the things we talked about before, bringing back the as-built plan, the certified mail, potentially the setbacks if we get to that, and another one recently came up with medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is currently under our bylaw required to have a nonprofit entity. And it also says in our zoning bylaw that it's consistent with the state's regulations. Well, the state has changed their regulations. It says you no longer have to be a nonprofit to do medical marijuana. And the selectmen have signed an agreement or communicated, I don't know the exact form of that quite yet, I'm trying to get to that, with a group that's not a nonprofit. And so they're looking at moving forward with a medical marijuana. And in order to do that, we'd have to amend the bylaw to remove this provision for not-for-profit.
So back to town meeting.
So the memo that I had sent you last week, with the wrong dates in it, had those in it previous, except it didn't have the medical marijuana. So I'll be sort of working on those things over the break to get them in a final format. I've sent them to Frank Duffy for his review as well, to make sure we're all on the same page with those things.
Okay. So that, we've moved on to next meeting. Charlotte, did you have something?
Yeah, I wondered on the minimum setbacks thing, the April meeting, as you pointed out, isn't for major changes or anything, it's just for little tweaks. And I wondered, did we all agree that that was a tweak?
The major tweak.
The biggest tweak?
The biggest tweak.
I'm not sure. I think we have further discussion on that. I'd like to see the impact. I know, I don't want to be rushing to town meeting with changes until we've had time to reach out to everybody and get their feedback on it, because it didn't work this year. So in past, we've taken years. The accessory apartment bylaw, we had a draft of it 2 years before we brought it forward. We didn't bring it forward till we knew it would pass.
Right.
And I hopefully will be, let's see how much work we can get done. I don't want
The setbacks is a bit of a lift.
I don't want to, we'll talk about that.
Okay. So it's a maybe.
Well, I think first we should work on it and then decide what we're going to bring
Yes,
it.
we should know what's involved
Whether
before
we-
we...
First, we decide what it is, and then we decide what we're going to do with it.
Right, I
Okay,
didn't want Tom to think that we,
No, I think we keep it on the agenda, keep moving forward, and we choose carefully whether we bring it to this
So
town meeting or next.
December 19th is the deadline to advertise for hearings commencing on January 8th. So as you see, that window's getting smaller and smaller.
right.
So depending upon
I think we should have a hearing.
my weeks and nights, I think if,
There's no harm in a hearing.
No,
Oh, no, I think we should have one.
yeah, we should definitely bring it up. Whether we decide to take it forward to town meeting or not, I want to have,
It could be, we have a hearing now, we have hearings later, we bring it up in the fall. There's no harm done.
well, and along the guise of the charter, how the charter works. And this is, by the way, the code that has charter stuff in it that I've been reading and working through. There's lots of interesting stuff in there, including one in our charter chapter, in our code, chapter 21, that says there's 9 members on the planning board. That's an
Yeah.
artifact from days gone by. I ran across that and just looking through the stuff that's in the book. There's lots of interesting stuff in there. But in any event, so along that lines of the Charter Commission and sorting those things out, some of my comments regard the process that we go for town meeting. Because under the state statute, the selectmen open a warrant, they transmit things to the planning board, and the planning board holds hearings. But the way we do things here, by the time they close the warrant, the planning board doesn't have a chance to have a hearing prior to the warrant being published. So I'll be chatting that up with the Charter Commission and other folks.
Well, we just don't want to get snagged in it again.
Yeah. Like I said, in 28 years, I'll be really good at this. By April, I'll be better.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'd asked that we would have ground-mounted solar also on this agenda, just briefly, so I brought some material in case that had actually happened, but it didn't.
Sorry.
But I would like to mention it anyway, and maybe we could address it briefly at our next meeting.
let's make sure it's on the agenda for next meeting.
That it's on the agenda, because remember, in the way that Mr. Banner got caught.
Yep.
Because once we've published a public hearing on something, we effectively bring things to a halt until we have acted on it. The state has model legislation, model bylaws for ground-mounted solar. They believe that it should be regulated, the state, since the passage of the law. We have a lot of language to
So
work
the
with.
statement that we can't regulate was not true?
Not true, right? And they particularly recommend that you, in this thing published by the state on how to regulate ground-mounted solar, that you divide them by size, small, medium, and large, and that you definitely require site plan review for mediums, that you define what is the size you're talking about, and that's what we would be talking about when it turns up on the agenda. And
January
these
8th.
copies are for you in case you want to look at that in advance.
Okay.
Can we get
Well, why
copies
don't
of
you,
that
why
before
don't
the
you
meeting?
share,
All off the internet.
why don't you share this with everybody? Tom, would you,
I would
the
absolutely
way
forward
it's
it.
supposed to go is not to me, to Tom, and he goes out to everybody. That's
There we go.
that's the system.
Thank you.
Notice I try not to send anybody emails.
It's a big
I
success.
agree. I think we need to get that on the agenda ASAP.
I'm all in favor of it.
And have a hearing, even though we know we won't make it for this go-round, we'll make
You
it for
mind
the
if
next.
we love it, we'll see.
Yeah.
Let's see what
Well,
happens.
particularly if we have a model to follow that's handed out by the state.
So right now, this is our last meeting for December. And our next meeting that we're scheduled for is January
January
8th.
8th. Which, I'm back by then, that's fine.
Okay. That completes our agenda.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
Holidays. Move
I
to
make a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
We're adjourned.
We're adjourned, okay.
Thank you.